Mukhaṁ karoti vācālam bhangum lambhayate girim jatkripatamaham vande Shri Guru Dinataram Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Upakadamahyam Dadati Swakadam. Oh. I was thinking of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's.
Yeah. Vidogdhamana Guru might have one here, but he's not here right now.
He doesn't have one here.
You took it back already?
Oh.
He had the whole one here.
Oh, he had the whole one.
Yeah. I'll look for it.
Can you bring my laptop? It's in that hemp, kind of a black hemp bag on the bed next to the table in there. Vansha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo. We were singing about Sharanagati the other day, and Bodhayan Maharaj pointed out one line is particularly important. This is the life of the devotees. But the core of Sharanagati, the catalyst that makes everything happen, is that touchstone of the holy name. And we know from the first verse of Shikshastakam that there are 7 wonderful effects of engaging in Sri Krishna Sankirtan, chanting the holy name, especially together. Cheto darpanamarjanam bhavamahadavarni nivapanam shreyakaya vachandrikaritam. So it cleanses the heart, gives us a chance to actually get a look at who we actually are. I mean, this is the first effect that Mahaprabhu gives, and just that alone is something that's completely invaluable. It's something that changes. It's something that changes lives, and I think that's probably especially evident in those of us who are older and who encountered the Sankirtan movement when we were already adults and thought we had lives. I hate Windows 8.
A lot of people say that.
I second that motion.
Now it's not even.
Wait.
I'm just going to try it again. And I was thinking of just really briefly relating my own experience with that first encounter with Sri Krishna Sankirtan. I thought I had a more elegant way, but it would have required my running up to the other building, and Bodhayan Maharaj didn't allow me to do that. I'm thinking of a particular line from, it's kind of the epilogue of Sharanagati, and I just have to find it. So, well, let me do this first. A long time ago, in a place far, far away, Honolulu. I went with some friends of mine to a rock concert. It was Jimi Hendrix. And because of the nature of my work, I was in the Navy at the time, because of the nature of my work, for a long time, I just didn't feel free to go to the concerts that I wanted to go to and hang out with the people that I wanted to in public, because it was not very compatible with top secret clearances and things like that. So I felt a little freedom this one time. I went to this concert. My friends just said, "Oh, Hendrix is playing this weekend. You want to go tonight?" It's the Pope Catholic. So I went, and there was a band that played, a warm-up band that played first, and then Hendrix came out. He played 2 songs, mumbled something about the sound system not being right for his music, and said he'd be back in 15 minutes while they fiddled with it. Perhaps more than an hour later, Marvin, who was one of the people with KPOI-FM, an underground FM station that sponsored the concert, came out and announced that Jimmy wasn't going to be able to play that night. There were other things going on in the electrical system. And that we should bring our ticket stubs back on Sunday. Meanwhile, while we were waiting for the concert to resume, there was this sound. We were at the Waikiki Shell, which is an open-air venue. And so meanwhile, outside, there was this sound that it just continued the entire time while we were waiting, probably more than an hour. And all I could hear inside was and sometimes it went faster, sometimes it went slower, but it never stopped. And I kept thinking, what in the world is that sound? It's interesting. And somehow I couldn't get my mind off it. I became a little obsessed with figuring out what this sound was. So when they told us the concert was not happening that night, naturally everybody started filing out the exit. Right outside the exit, on the sidewalk by the parking lot, was this Sankirtan party. My dear friend Govinda Dasi, maybe Jayashri, Turiya Das, who told me that, and if anybody, I don't know if anybody knows Turiya Das, but he told me, Turiya Das was actually the person who brought me in, kind of reeled me in. He said that this was the first time he'd been in public with his head shaved. And Sudama, my old friend Sudama. Turiya Das was playing guitar, Sudama was playing mridanga, and they had this beautiful kind of rainbow-colored sign with the Maha Mantra behind them, and they were chanting. And everybody we just clogged around the Sankirtan party and started chanting. And finally, the crowd around the Sankirtan party got to be so big that people couldn't get out.
That's a nice story.
So the cops told the devotees, got to move. So Sudama and Turiya Das led everyone down into Kapiolani Park. This was May 30th, 1969. It was a full moon in the spring in Honolulu by the beach in Kapiolani Park. It was magic.
Wow.
And there were thousands of people chanting Hare Krishna. And you just don't forget. I couldn't forget something like that. I wasn't the only person there who wound up here. My dear friend Kusha also met the devotees that night. And, strange but true, a few months later, we moved into the temple on the same day.
Wow. Independent of each other.
Yeah, we didn't know each other. Kusha did not forget that. She ended up spending some time with the Krishna Yoga community, known then as Sai's group, the Krishna Yoga community, which ended up joining ISKCON, and he was initiated as Siddha Swarup, and later as Siddha Swarupananda Goswami. And I just did my Navy things, and then getting out of the Navy things and surfer things for a little while. But we both ended up moving into the temple just before a few days before Gaur Purnima in 1970. And that Sankirtan party changed our lives. Because that handful of, as Srila Prabhupada called us back then, and I don't think only he could see us as that anymore, boys and girls, were bold enough to go down there and chant Hare Krishna in front of that crowd. Some lives were changed, at least a couple of lives were changed. And who knows about the other people, because not everybody, in May, perhaps not everybody who's around Honolulu for a rock concert is necessarily someone who ends up staying local. That, there may be people in other parts of the world my age who met the devotees that night at that concert. So, and the devotees were quite active. Govindadasi, Gaur Sundar, Balabhadra, Jayashri, Turidas, they were very active in bringing the holy name out into the public. It was a kind of a special time in the world, and it certainly seemed like that in Hawaii at the time. And again, it wasn't just the ISKCON devotees at that time, but for several months, perhaps maybe another year and a half, there were actually two groups of Hare Krishna devotees. So if you went to Waikiki, at one end of Kalakaua Avenue, you'd see maybe the ISKCON devotees, and at the other end of Kalakaua Avenue, you'd see Krishna Yoga community devotees. And sometimes, in between, there would be groups of Christians out there singing gospel songs or something on the street. So the Christians picked up on the Sankirtan movement at the same time. So it was quite an interesting time. So this is a touchstone. I mean, I was just I wouldn't even say misguided. I had absolutely no guidance at all. I was completely rudderless at the time. All I could think of, the only thing that I lived for was if there were halfway decent waves, I was in the ocean. And but actually, when I encountered the Sankirtan party, that got me reading Bhagavad Gita as it is, and then Srimad Bhagavatam, which just completely revolutionized my whole perspective on the world. But when I went back that night, I didn't have really much of a sense that my life was different, but I kept remembering the Kirtan party. And when a few months later I actually sat down again and chanted with the devotees, that's a whole different story. I would, even if I was in Waikiki, I'd walk on the other side of the street. I think I mentioned this the other night. After having joined the Navy, I never wanted to join anything ever again. But there was Turidas on the other side of the street. He invited me to Queen's Surf Park. And my idea the next morning was, when I woke up, I remembered that I told the Krishna monk that I would go to their feast at Queen's Surf. So I had to go. I just felt like I had to go. And I thought, okay, here's the deal. If you're going to go, you got to go in a frame of mind. It's 1969, if you get my drift. Maybe this was 1970. In a frame of mind that you can I went open. I just kind of opened my heart up, and I just said, okay, let's see what the Hare Krishna mantra does. That afternoon, when I went back to my apartment, I had a completely different perspective on everything. It hadn't really formed yet, but I knew my life was different. I knew my life was different because I just sat down with the devotees. I opened up my heart and I chanted the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra with them. So that's the beginning. And the Wi-Fi's on. Pardon me. So what the holy name does is it ultimately reveals everything to us. Our commitment to the holy name, because the holy name is Krishna, because it is a touchstone. And in a kind of epilogue, it's a Nam Mahatmya. He calls it a Nam Mahatmya, a glorification of the holy name. At the end of his Sharanagati songs, Bhakti Thakur says a couple of interesting things. He says, Loino ashroy jar, heno byabaharatar, bornite ne pariye sakal, Krishna nama icha moy, jahe sukhe hoy, se mor sukhera sambhav. Such is the behavior of him of whom I've taken shelter. I'm not capable of describing all this. The holy name of Krishna is independent and thus acts on his own sweet will, goes wherever he wants. In whatever way he becomes happy, that is also my way of happiness. Then he says, Premera kolika nam, abhuta rosera dham, henobala koroya prakash, ishat bikashipuna dehai nija rupa guna, chitta hari loy krishna pas. The holy name is the bud of the flower of divine love, and it's the very abode of all astonishing mellows. Such is the power he manifests when his holy name starts to blossom a little further. Such is the power he manifests that when his holy name starts to blossom a little further, it then reveals his own divine form and qualities. Thus my heart is abducted and taken directly. Yeah. Thus my heart is directed and taken directly to Krishna. Purna vikashita hoya braje mora jayaloya dekhaya mori swarupa vilas mori siddha dehadiya Krishna pashe rokigiya edehera koli sorvanash. Becoming a blossoming fully, the flower of the holy name takes me to Braja and reveals to me his own pastimes, gives me my own eternal spiritual body, keeps me right by Krishna's side and completely destroys everything related to this mortal frame of mind. Krishna nama chintamani akila rasera khani nitya mukta shuddha rasamoy namer balai jata sabaloy hoyam hata tabi mora sukharudoy. The name of Krishna is a transcendental touchstone, a mine of all devotional mellows. It is eternally liberated, the empowerment of pure rasa, and when all impediments to the pure chanting of the holy name are taken away and destroyed, then my happiness will know its true awakening. So this is the real power of the holy name. It's our chanting of the holy name that reveals everything we need. It reveals to us at the beginning who is our Guru and how to surrender. The holy name gives us everything. This is the mine of all transcendental mellows. Every gem, every transcendental gem that you could imagine is there in the holy name. And it reveals to us our siddha, it uncovers our siddha deha. I mean, this is Cheto Darpana Marjanam on steroids. The mirror becomes so cleansed that we see just who we are. Not just at the beginning we begin to see I'm consciousness. I'm different from this and this body and all the stuff that I have attached to it. And ultimately it shows us I'm Krishna's and Krishna's mine. And this is how we roll. So this is the transcendental power of the holy name, and this is why devotees are sometimes get a little excited about sharing the holy name with others. And Abhaya Maharaj will now give us some real nectar.
Try.